Hey guys, it's Canadian. Welcome to another First Impressions video, this time on the Scoundrel. This is for the upcoming expansion. I'm playing on the player test server right now, so the expansion release is still several months away, so a lot of this shit could probably change, and I hope will. But yeah, we're having a look at Ruffian first here, and then maybe in another video I would definitely love to cover Scrapper, because I've checked out Scrapper and I was actually seriously impressed with what I saw there. I also saw some of the things that are going in Sawbones here as well, but I don't really play Sawbones, but some of the buffs I saw they were getting were pretty fucking nuts. So, same with Scrapper. It seems Scrapper got super buffed in the burst department, you know, like, I can't think of anybody ever saying, you know, I don't think Scrapper does enough burst in PvP, so they've definitely given it more burst. So, yeah, that could be fun. We'll see how that one works out. But yeah, for today we'll cover Ruffian. So just a quick look at the tree here. So the column on the right, these are all the passives that make the spec what it is. So it doesn't appear like anything really changed too much there, so we're pretty good for the most part. So just a couple things to note though. So first up here, we'll look at pugnacity here. So for each spec, pugnacity has been modified slightly. So for Scrapper, theirs does extra crit damage, and for Ruffian, ours will do, you get the surprise comeback utility rolled into it, so that was from 6.0, so that utility's gone now. It's just get rolled into the Ruffian version of pugnacity, so they're the only spec that has access to surprise comeback now. But it gives you a little of a heal there based on your total health, and 20% damage reduction. Is just baked into that, so that's actually really good for PvP. That'll make you fairly tanky when you pop your pugnacity, and the cooldown on that's pretty low too, so that'll be up fairly often as well. Yeah, the other thing here is it's not really an option you have to pick here, but Brutal Shots is just something you get at level 23. Now the 27 tier here are utilities that will modify your Brutal Shots. Now, Brutal Shots, on average, you know, give or take, well, should be in the ballpark of about 40% of your damage. So it's a fairly significant choice you have to make here, just because it's so important in your rotation, at least for the single target, obviously. So the first one we'll look at here, Brutal Return. Now, I think this one is probably going to be better for PvP. So you do have another option, I think, for PvP you could go with, but I think this would give you probably the best flexibility. So the upper hand return that you get after you use Brutal Shots, it can only occur once every 10 seconds, but that's just about fine, because that's roughly about how long your burst window is going to be, where you get all your buffs going, you get your cut to the quick buff going from point blank shot, and you start unloading Brutal Shot window. So usually by the time you're ready to reset and do it again, the Brutal Return passive is going to be up, so you'll get that return one more time. So that should be pretty good. Now also, pugnacity will last 5 seconds longer, so for those 5 seconds you get a little more healing, and you'll be a little tankier for longer. So overall, Brutal Return is actually a pretty good choice. Next up, you also have Penetrating Strategies. Increases your armor penetration, critical hit chance, and critical hit damage of Brutal Shots by 10%. So this is actually a very significant buff, especially for single target here. So if you didn't necessarily need the tankiness and the flexibility on having that Brutal Shot return an upper hand there, Penetrating Strategies is probably the next best bet here. It could actually be the best. We'll see what the number crunchers have to say in the Theory Crafty forum. Yeah, so this seems actually on the face value here really strong. So I think that'll be a really compelling choice. And your last option here to talk about, Brutal Impair. So Brutal Shots does 10% additional weapon damage and slows the target by 50% for 6 seconds. Now, the Scoundrel class in general lost Sever Tendon, so that was a 50% snare you could apply from range. So yeah, unfortunately that's gone now. So at least with Ruffian spec, you have your grenade, your dot grenade there will apply 30% snare. So that's always going to be on the target. So for Ruffian losing the Sever Tendon snare, it's not such a big deal. So this talent here, because you always have a 30% snare, and a lot of your abilities can be used from range, so it's usually not a big deal for Ruffian not to have Sever Tendon anymore. I mean, I practically never used it when I had it in 6.0. So this last talent here, just having Brutal Shots apply a snare, not really necessary in my opinion, but if there's some reason where I guess the meta shapes up where in the future scoundrels get nerfed somehow in the mobility department, then the snare may become more necessary. I think if Scrapper had a choice like this, they don't, but they have something similar where their sucker punch can apply a snare as well. So for Scrappers, they might take a hard look at it because they might actually need the snare more than Ruffian does anyway. So the level 35 tier here, I think the clear-cut winner here is Dirty Kick because you do lose your stun. It's no longer baseline, but yeah, it's definitely such a great option to have your nut kick there. So yeah, I think that's probably the default, I think, for just about everybody. But you also have slide countermeasures here, so this increases the dodge by 2 seconds, and you know, it's a little PvE thing here, but it lowers threat by a little bit too. So it's like, yeah, that's kind of cool, I guess, for PvE. But for PvP though, the extra 2 seconds on your dodge there, you can actually combine it with the back at ya talent that reflects damage. So what it works out to be for Ruffian Scoundrels in 7.0 is you get a 6-second dodge that reflects damage back at 150%. So that's longer than the duration you can experience right now in 6.0. And I already know from playing a Tactics Vanguard and my AP Power Tech that if I unload all my burst damage into a Scoundrel who pops dodge and I get that shit reflected back, it hurts so much. Like, it's like, why am I dying so fast? So, and if you can pop that thing in 7.0 for 6 seconds, like, people are going to soon develop like that psychological problem of the time you touch the stove and you got a little burned and now you're a little gun shy. So yeah, I think people are going to look at a Scoundrel and see a stove. But yeah, you don't necessarily need the sly countermeasures utility here. I think the nut kick's probably going to be a lot more useful. The last talent in this tier here, I think this is just really a PvE thing. I don't think in PvP giving up an increased dodge or a nut kick is going to be worth doing 25% more lacerating blast damage, and a 40% snare. I mean, that's not really good. Your AoE grenade's providing a 30% snare anyway, so yeah, this talent's just really for the lacerating blast damage, and that's only really useful in PvE. Okay, so your level 43 tier here, this is the one that modifies your shrap bombs or your dot grenade. So the first one we'll talk about here, Shrap Bomb refunds 2 energy for each target it hits. So I don't think really Ruffian suffers from an energy problem because you have Fighting Spirit is giving you energy return on every dot tick. So when you throw dots on everybody, you're just constantly getting energy back. So it's not really an energy problem. It's more or less the bottleneck for Ruffian Scoundrels is the global cooldown. So how many abilities you can crank out, so like how many rolls, dots, and hots that you can put on people. So that's the real bottleneck is your global cooldown here, not the energy. So so when you're looking at the options here, Shrap Bomb refunding more energy, you don't really need it in my opinion. Maybe in PvE where you're doing parsing and whatnot, that actually shit, not even for that, man. I think just talent is just probably bad. Alright, so next one to talk about, Critical Bomb. Shrap Bomb increases the critical hit damage of your periodic bleed effects to targeted effects by 10%. So that's actually pretty good. So some extra crit damage on your bleeds. So that'll increase with the Brutal Shots window too, because Brutal Shots prompts your dots to tick again. So that'll be actually kind of good. So it'll make your Brutal Shots a little stronger indirectly. So yeah, not a bad pick for that talent actually. Next, Shrap Defense. So your Shrap Bomb deals 10% more initial damage and grants 2% damage reduction per targeted hits for 10 seconds. Now the 10% initial damage it does on the grenade, like the grenade hits for fuck all. So an extra 10% damage on fuck all is fuck all. So that part doesn't matter. But as far as like the damage reduction goes, like I never got a chance to actually test this. I was throwing it at target dummies and I wasn't getting a buff. So I don't know if I was meant to or if I was actually just not seeing it or for some reason. Or maybe it only occurs if I'm throwing it at actual players and not target dummies. But yeah, for some reason this talent just didn't work for me. So not quite sure what was going on there, but the actual shrap bomb damage on it though it's not even noticeable. So yeah, I think there's some number tweaking that needs to go on for this one here, but if they go live with this stuff and it launches as it is, then I think without a doubt critical bomb is just going to be the default for everybody because the damage is good. Okay, so our next tier here, this is just kind of a free choice on what you want. So first one here is leveraged offense. Having upper hand increases all damage and healing dealt by 5%. So not terrible. You know, an extra 5% damage and healing, and your hots and dots are going to be rolling all the time. So this would be pretty decent to pick. And it's just static. It's always going to be there for you, so you don't have to activate it or anything. So this is kind of like an easy choice if you have other things you need to dedicate your attention to. Next, hot streak. So this is the one we know and love from before. So just resets the cooldowns on a bunch of stuff you're going to be using all the time, and it increases your mastery by 20% for 15 seconds. So that gives you a fairly long window where you can do a lot of damage. So if you got everything lined up and you used all your cooldowns first, then it's a good time to hit hot streak, and you can actually reset all your cooldowns, so you need to survive, or if you want to do a little extra damage, it's really sweet. Now the 3-minute cooldown is like a little long, but 3 minutes isn't too bad. Generally, the other cooldowns that you burn are going to be coming up first, so you can use them again before hot streak will reset at another time for you. All right, so next, artful cunning. Pugnacity purges movement and pairing effects and maxes out your upper hand. So this is kind of a dual purpose root breaker as well as a burst cooldown. So I think you could probably get away with not needing this. The only thing is right now Scoundrel's lost I can't remember the name of it, but their ability that would dump threat would also, if you picked a talent, would act as a root breaker for you. Now, Scoundrels can use triage to cleanse any tech debuffs. So if like a sniper applies a root to you, for example, you can triage yourself and cleanse the root, so you can roll or do whatever you got to do. The only roots that would actually keep you locked down were force roots. So if like a Madness Sork, for example, puts one of their dots on you, and then that puts the 2-second root on you, you can't break that with triage. So that one you just have to eat. But what that, I think it was countermeasures, whatever that ability was that dumps threat. The name's escaping me right now. But if you use that against the force root, it would break. So we're kind of losing that in 7.0. We don't have that threat dump root cleanse anymore. So if you get force rooted as Ruffian, you're going to be stuck there. So having Pugnacity break snares, or break roots rather, might be necessary. So we'll have to see on that one, but my gut instinct right now is that I don't think it's needed, and plus the Pugnacity cooldown at, just over a minute and a half, that's a fairly long cooldown if you're just using it as a root breaker. Like, obviously it's going to save your bacon if you really need to use it for that, but Pugnacity is such a strong cooldown, you don't want to throw that one around just as a root breaker. You probably want it for the other benefits, really. So yeah, Artful Cunning on that one, I'm a little on the fence. I can see it's definitely a good choice, but I don't know if it's better than Hot Streak. I think Hot Streak might be a little better and more useful. But yeah, I'll play with both and see how it goes. But I also have to see how the meta ships up. But yeah, those are two of the better ones in for this tier anyway. All right, so our level 60 choice here. The first one here is Flee the Scene. So that's just reducing the cooldown on your vanish there, and gives you a little run speed buff. I think this one might be the worst pick in the tier. I found personally when I play Ruffian that I'm not vanishing all that often, usually because the spec is a little more tanky than Scrapper. Like, Scrapper tends to be kind of a glass cannon almost. It's just the only thing that saves a Scrapper from dying is effective use of their rolls, so they just don't take damage. But if Ruffian doesn't have that luxury, obviously, so they tend to be a lot better at absorbing damage through their increased healing and damage reduction, that kind of shit. So, I found not needing to vanish all that often, and I didn't find the run speed, because I'm not vanishing that often, like getting a run speed boost when I do vanish wasn't all that helpful, because the only time, like as soon as I vanish, the one thing I'm worried about is someone's going to spam an AoE ability or throw down a stealth scan to pop me back out. So if what I find is as soon as I vanish, I want to roll as quickly as possible after the vanish, so I get out of the area where people saw me vanish from, because they're most likely going to throw their AoE at the spot they saw me vanish at. So to get out of dodge, I find just using Scamper, just your roll, is more than enough, so you don't really need the vanish movement speed buff. But if people are playing a style where they're leaning heavily on vanish for maybe extra burst damage or something like that, then maybe this might be a useful pick for them. But you'd have to look at the other two options first to decide if you want to give it up yet. So next is we got Sneaky. So this is really good for PvP. It gives you an extra 15% movement speed, which I think in the way I've seen classes developing is there's going to be a lot less mobility for all classes in general. So having an increased movement speed, I think, is going to be a little more necessary now. But the other icing on the cake here is that it increases your stealth level by 3, which I find if you're doing a lot of war zones and you want to be the sneaky special forces motherfucker who's going behind and trying to solo cap everything, Sneaky will give you a lot of use here, I think. And then last but not least, we have Scar Tissue, so just a flat 5% damage reduction. So that's not bad. It was a nice pick in 6.0 just to take versus some of the other options you have, but now that you're kind of forced to decide between it and the other ones, I think Ruffian is tanky enough with the healing that you could probably get away with not having that damage reduction and probably going with Sneaky just for the movement speed boost. So I think I'll go with that initially here, and if I find for some reason I just keep constantly dying, then I might go with Scar Tissue. But I think for now, Sneaky's probably the best pick, at least for my money in this tier. Alright, so the 68 tier here, first up we got Med Screen. So your defense screen heals you for 5% of your maximum health when it collapses. That's it. So that seems pretty weak. So that thing never... You're not popping defense screen all that often. I know the cooldown's fairly short on it, but 5% healing when it collapses isn't too much. And I don't think it's worth giving up for comparing to one of your other choices here. So next... we got Keep Cool, so your cool head down immediately restores 15 additional energy. Now, I touched on it earlier how Ruffian really doesn't suffer from energy problems that badly to need a dedicated talent for it, so I think you could probably just drop this. I don't think anyone's really going to need it that badly. Last, but not least, we have Skedaddle. So when activated, your Vanish grants you 2 seconds to dodge. So that is for I think the most important one, because when you eventually need to vanish, you need to get the fuck out of dodge. So nothing can hurt you. Generally, you're going to be popping your Vanish when you're probably really low on health. So that 2 seconds of dodge will cleanse any dots that would pop you out of Vanish, and if anyone's throwing some AoE at you, you'll resist it. So it really guarantees that when you pop a Vanish, you're getting away. As long as the only thing that's really going to pop you out, though, is a stealth scan. The dodge can't help you there, but for anything else, that's going to make sure that when you hit Vanish, you're getting away for sure. It's not a problem. So yeah, without a doubt, I think Skedaddle is just going to be the no-brainer pick for this tier. Alright, so the next tier, it doesn't cut deep, but it's definitely a paper cut. So what we're looking at here is we have Smuggle. You know, that's a really cool ability for arenas. Generally not too useful in Warzone, so like he has some use, but generally you only really pick this for arenas. So you, unless you're super needing this, I think most people could drop this and it wouldn't bother them at all. So next up we have Flash Grenade. It's the ability we all know and love, and yeah, I think this will be the default pick for just about everybody. And what's cool is they've rolled into that utility that when the grenade ends, the people that were affected by it have a 20% accuracy debuff on them, so it just means for a little while afterwards that there's a lot more chance that they're going to miss you. So it just buys you a little extra time. So it's actually kind of nice that they rolled that into it. So I think Flash Grenade's probably the best pick out of this tier here. But last but not least, we have Trick Move. So that was your teleport here, and it also gave you a little bit of a run speed buff too. So losing the teleport kind of sucks. That was a nice thing to have, but when it worked, it was a nice thing to have. When it didn't work, you'd be teleporting into space, or not teleport at all, or teleport into something you didn't think could be possible. So yeah, it was buggy, but you know, it was also incredibly useful just to have. So there's going to be some times where before classes really had the difficult time getting away from you. Now they're still going to have a hard time, but it's going to be easier now. That's for sure. So classes like Lightning Sorks, for example, they're going to be kitey McKite face down for you. That's going to be really hard to close the gap without it, because if you're burning your rolls just for mobility, that's not good. So, yeah. But I think the flash grenade's probably the best. If you got someone else that can do the AoE CCs for you, then okay, trick move might be good. But yeah, I think flash grenade is just so useful. I think everyone's going to go for that one instead. So your last tier here, this one, yeah, cuts deep. So what you got here is Scramble. So every time you get a hit, the active cooldown of your dodge is reduced by 3 seconds. So this makes dodge up like frequently. Like, it's really good. So with dodge being up so often, you can use it for cleansing roots, because it's kind of almost like a throwaway cooldown to that point. Yeah, it'll get you out of trouble a lot. So having that up is really good. Now, what kind of sucks about it, though, in this tier is that back at you, that talent that reflects damage. That talent was so good. That reflected way too much damage. You know, some classes would just TKO themselves when this thing was up, and you could really, like, if you knew that burst damage was coming, you could time your dodges perfectly so that the second that burst damage lands, you reflect everything right back to them. And in a lot of cases, like, people just don't understand why they're dying so quickly. It's just they just see their health just drop rapidly, and that's because you pop this cooldown at your dodge at the right moment. But yeah, you have a choice now between possibly having like a really strong dodge cooldown with a strong reflect, or you're going to be looking at having a shorter dodge, but it's up more frequently. So that's kind of the choice you're left with now. So I think I'd probably go with the dodge that's up more frequently, because I find the utility it grants you and the defense is a lot more useful than maybe just doing a little bit of extra damage. But without a doubt, the damage it does do is pretty good. And your last choice in this tier is KO. I mean, there's really never a reason to use this, to be honest, just because you have to be in stealth to use it. And Ruffian doesn't really need to be in stealth at all, except for just to not be seen. That's basically it. The opening rotation for Scrapper, you can make some arguments for, needing to be stealth to get Backblast off, but Ruffian doesn't need to use point blank shot as their first button from stealth. Usually it's better to, from a distance, to throw grenades and then move in closer with other abilities. So yeah, KO is just one of those things where in a perfect world, if you didn't have to pick the other two talents and you had garbage between it, okay, maybe you could have some fun with KO. But in this tier, like, KO is such a wasted pick. The other two utilities are way better. So but yeah, I think Scramble out of the three here being the best in tier. So that's it for the Ruffian Scoundrel here. They look to be in pretty good shape. I'm not worried about how it's going to play. I think it's going to function just the same as it did in 6.0. I'm not expecting any too big changes here. I think Scrapper and Sawbones will change a lot. I think Scrapper Burst, just from what I saw, looks like it's going to be for me right now where, like, I can't overlook how good the Burst is anymore. I think it's just going to be, well, I can't play Ruffian anymore because Scrapper's just too damn good. So we'll see how things go. I'll do a Scrapper video down the road after I have a chance of playing around with this back here. But yeah, Ruffian I think is going to be in really good shape. I think I'll still be playing in PvP because it's just so fun being that kind of class that can kill everybody and heal the whole team at the same time. It's just a bit ridiculous at times. But anyway, we'll see you guys next time. All right, guys?